Hello, my name is Bambaji and I'm here to take you through a gate transit. The sun is transiting through gate 40 and it begins at 14:57 British Summer Time on Wednesday the 28th of August. Gate 40, the gate that the sun is moving into, is called the Gate of Deliverance. It's a gate in the ego center. You can see from this image here, it's a tribal gate. So the circuitry is tribal circuitry, and it is in what's called the ego sub-circuit of tribal circuitry. The ego center is also called the heart center. It's sometimes called the will center. So there can be some confusion about it. It's a complex gate, as you'll see as we go through this overview. Gate 40 is one of the three pairings in the wheel where the harmonic gate, gate 37, is also the polarity. So this means that the gate at the other end of the channel is also the gate on the opposite side of the wheel. There are two others. So there is the 4323, which goes between the ajna and the throat. So they are also polarities and harmonics, and the 3420, that's the other one. Itchy back. So that's where we find this is where we get a channel. Whenever the 40 is in the sun or the 37 is in the sun, we know that the opposite is going to be in the earth, and so we're going to get this channel. And this is the channel of community. This is what we find when we have this definition, the ego to the solar plexus. And of course, it's possible to have the 40 without having the 37 and vice versa, but it is a very common sun, earth and nodal combination. And so we very often see them together. Because I'm doing a sun transit report, the 37 is automatically going to be part of that equation. So what can I tell you about gate 40? Well, there are three gates of aloneness, or gates of social caution, in the body graph. Gate 40 is one of these, together with gate 12 and gate 33. The 40th gate is the primary gate of aloneness. So actually its name, it's the Gate of Aloneness. It's also called Deliverance. And it's also called the Gate of Denial. There's a lot going on in gate 40. And there's an interesting dichotomy between the 40th gate in the ego, which is this gate of denial, and the 37th gate in the emotional solar plex system, which is the gate of being hopeful and being open and being affectionate. There's a confrontation between the affection in the emotional system and that ego denial. And yet at the same time, the 40th gate, as an ego gate, it's really dedicated to working for the community. And its very denial is rooted in the fact that its energy can be tapped into. And when its energy is tapped into, it needs a suitable reward. Otherwise, it's going to say no. There's always a bargain involved when you're looking at this channel. Or the gates on either end, actually, they both carry that element of bargaining. I have this channel. I don't have it as the sun, earth, or the nodes. I have the 40 in my Pluto, and the 37 is in my in my Jupiter. So I don't have it in that sense in the wheel. But this is my channel. It's my only channel, and I have it in the line 6 on both sides. And I'm aware of this. There's a bargain. Bargain is everything. And it's really, really important, if you are carrying this energy, that you are clear about the bargains that you enter into. Because depending on your type, then there is going to be that kickback if the bargain isn't met, or if something about the bargain falls apart, or because it's a lot to do with loyalty, with it being the channel of community, if somehow your loyalty is trodden on, then that also can make the bargain fall apart and can bring in bitterness, frustration, anger. Obviously, you're not going to bring in disappointment because the reflectors don't have channels, but if you've got a gate at either end, then there's the possibility for disappointment as well, of course. So the 40 does love work. It is a love gate, and it is the gate of loving work. And it works for the reward of the rest that it's going to get afterwards. And it works for the reward of the recognition that it gets for its contribution, for the work that it gives. And when the rest or the recognition isn't there, then the 40th gate, as the gate of denial, is going to say no. And it's not going to contribute anymore. It won't give its ego energy. It will just, it will pull back. And that can also be a very powerful statement. As powerful as the ego is in working and in contributing and in doing all of that stuff for the community, the power of its no, its denial is also it can be very, let's say, impactful, but it's not on its own. It's not a manifestor energy, but it does have impact when that ego is like, no, enough. The mechanic of the ego is a will or a lack of will to provide for the needy. This is the role of the 40th gate. When the willpower is there, its purpose is to provide for those who have a need. This is the thing that drives the ego. It's the need of those who call upon it. It really wants to be useful. It wants to use its will for that reason, to make things better for other people, to give them whatever it is that they need. The 37th gate, sitting at the other end of that channel, is actually a needy gate. So these two work very well together in that sense. What it needs, what the 37 needs, is affection. And it needs touch. This is one of the channels of touch in the stream of touch. So it needs touch. It needs to be fed. The 37 is the mouth. The 40 is the stomach. So you have to feed the mouth before the stomach can be satisfied. The 37 also needs kissing. Being the gate of the mouth, it is also the gate of the kiss. Remember the or not. You have people with 37 who are just not interested in kissing ever. So that also must always be pulled into it. But in terms of how I'm presenting it to you, it is a gate of the kiss. Bargains are often sealed with a kiss. They are sealed with a handshake, but they can be sealed with a kiss. So in return, and this is the bargain coming up, the 37 gives the 40 what the 40 really craves, and that is support and loyalty. The 40th gate is very vulnerable to loyalty. And one of the ways that that loyalty can be proven is through the recognition of the hard work that it will put in order to give its community the best chance of being the most viable community, being the strongest community, being the tribe that is going to get through to the future with the best genes and the best qualities of humanity embedded in it. All of these things run through the 40, through the channel of community. So the 40 is also called Deliverance. That's the I Ching name for it. And this is very fitting because the nature of the 3740, it's part of the marriage contract. This is one of the ultimate bargains that we have in our society. So in terms of that marriage contract, the 40 is expected to deliver. The 40 and its willpower is expected to go out there into the world and conquer the material plane. Tribal circuitry, the whole thing about the tribe is very material. That's part of how the tribe proves it's successful, because of how it stands firm on the material plane, how it faces the material plane and it wins, if you like. You could see it in that whole competitive thing. It's going to face the material plane and come out on top. In return for that, the ego likes to be massaged. It likes to be told it's doing a good job. It likes to be told that, yeah, you're doing really well. Thank you so much for everything that you do for the community. Thank you for your phenomenal willpower. Likes that little massage. That's part of its bargain. The 40th gate in itself is not a big, powerful will. Actually, the whole ego really is quite lazy in many ways. Yes, it can push through. And yes, it does love to work. But the ultimate bargain that the 40th gate, that the ego is coming into, but the 40th gate particularly being that channel with the bargain, is that it wants to rest and be recognized for its hard work and to be appreciated It wants to have its ego massaged, and it will continue to work hard. And then ultimately it wants to have as much rest as possible. That's the ultimate bargain here. It's like the least amount of work for the most amount of rest. And that this is what the ego is sort of moving towards. And this is partly why it will work so hard, because it wants to, get up that ladder. And part of the whole tribal circuitry is that ambition that goes from the marrying maiden in the 54 in the root center, and it pushes up, taking the tribe with it, building its resources, having the most amazing tribe possible, going into the splenic, going 44 to the 26, 26 being another ego gate. And this again is one of the roles in the 26, is it wants to work as hard as possible, but it wants the most possible reward. It doesn't want to work as hard as possible. It wants it wants to work the most little it can. That's not very good English, is it? It wants to work the least it can for the most amount of rest possible. If it could work on a beach and just do 5 minutes a day and then spend the rest of the day flat on its back, the ego would be very happy with that. But it needs to have that reward coming in order for that balance to be correct. The heart center itself is very complex and often very misunderstood. Egoism, it's something that is really put down. And particularly that the Eastern religions, ego is seen as the enemy, really. The quality of I and the possessiveness that comes through ego. Gate 21. Gate 21 going up to gate 45, which is the money line. Gate 45 is the only throat gate that the ego has. It's the only way the tribe can express itself. And its voice is I have. So it's a very possessive energy that comes through from the ego center. And when you're looking at the ego, you look at its biological correspondences, and it's really complex. It has more biological associations or correspondences than any other center. There are only 4 gates here, and each one has a different biology associated with it. We have the stomach in the 40th gate. The gallbladder is in the 51st gate. The heart muscle itself is the 21st gate, and our thymus gland is in the 26th gate. So that's our immunity. It's a very complex structure, a very complex center. And all of this information, the biology, moves out through the ego, through its associated channels and into all the other areas of the body graph. So nothing's in isolation, of course. So the stomach and the heart, if you look at those as 2 organs, you can see the deep nature of how the ego is designed to work. You can get a real insight for it by looking just on the surface of how those 2 organs work. The ego, it's not designed to work consistently. And this is really important to grasp. Willpower can only last so long as there are certain circumstances in play, and then it has to stop. And this is the way the heart works, in a way. The heart beats and then it stops. It beats and then it stops. It can't hold that tone the whole time. There has to be those spaces in between where it stops. It just wouldn't survive otherwise. And the same is true for the nature of the stomach. We don't feed our stomachs all day long. Our stomachs need a time of rest, and they need to be able to do their work to assimilate what we've put in there and digest it and allow the body to absorb it. So again, this is how the 40th gate needs to work. It's the gate of the stomach. You don't expect it to go, 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 go all the time. It needs its periods of rest in order for it to then work more efficiently when it does work. It's always looking for rest. And if you follow the line transits as we go through them over the next 6 days, more or less, then you will hear this over and over again. The real bargain is work for rest, work for rest, work for rest. That's what the 40th gate is interested in. The ego is always trying to find a way of getting more rest for less work. That's its equation. So every time the ego uses its energy, its willpower, it should should have at least an equal amount of time as rest for its reward. This is its balance. And if it doesn't get that, then eventually you build up enormous problems for yourself. Partly because this is the gate of denial. So you get to the point where it just says, no, I'm not doing anymore. But there can also be the physical attributes of the ego that come into play and say no. You don't want your stomach packing up and giving you ulcers. You don't want the gallbladder suddenly giving you problem, or the thymus breaking down and not looking after your immunity properly. And you certainly don't want your heart to suddenly say no. The headline for Gate 40, this is the above the lines, it says the point of transition between struggle and liberation. And these are the two aspects. The struggle is the use of the ego, and liberation is rest. Liberation is putting your feet up and being a couch potato. The 40th gate is looking for a 37 on the other end there that says, oh, you've worked so hard today. Come in, sit down. I've made your favorite dinner. As a hardworking, defined ego with Gate 40, I have to say how grateful I am to Bear, who has Gate 37 at the other end, because he does just that. He supports my ego beautifully. He brings me cups of tea. He nudges me to take a bit of a break when my willpower pushes me to do just that little bit more. He cooks me wonderful food, so my stomach is happy. And he is always very generous with his recognition and appreciation. And I'm very, very grateful for his care. It enables me to do what I love to do, and that is my work with human design. I have to keep a tight rein on my 40 though, because it really does have the will to work very hard. And I have my Chiron at the moment. I'm in my Chiron return, which gives me a little bit of it doesn't make me a manifesting generator, but it lays that over the top of my projector nature. So I have this illusion of having such a lot of power in my design at the moment. So I have to be really careful with 40. So watch all these things for yourselves. How is your life playing out through the design that you have? Oh, with my defined will and my Gate 40 and my ability to work really hard, I have to balance that with my open sacral, which never knows when enough is enough. And if I'm not careful, then there's a recipe for burnout right there. So all of these things must be looked at. So yes, I'm just giving you Gate 40 and a little bit of Gate 37. How does that work in your design? Well, what does that bring to you? What are your own insights for yourself? The nature of the ego is that it works and then it takes a holiday. And it's a really important part of its nature to understand. And not only to understand it, but to honor it. So the 40th gate, we said it's Gate of the stomach. And when you look at any hexagram, I mentioned this when we go through the lines, when you look at the first line, it gives you a really deep insight into the nature of that hexagram, the essence of that hexagram. And here the first line is called recuperation. And it says the ability to relax and enjoy the fruits of one's labor. And this is the very basis of what the 40th gate is all about. There's no point working unless you get the reward, unless you can put your feet up and enjoy those fruits. And labor is a given. Work is a given. The work must be done. The community has to be built and supported, and the bargain has to be made. And yet at the same time, without the reward, the ego will no longer have the stomach for the work. And that's a phrase that it's not used so much. Certainly I remember it when I was growing up being something that was in sort of the common vocabulary, is I don't have the stomach for that. So this is something the ego will say. It's that, I don't have the stomach to support that anymore. Or you could even say that makes me sick. because this is a stomach thing. It's like, no, I can't do that. It makes me sick. The ego cannot keep working. It cannot keep supporting if it doesn't have that bargain being fulfilled. And one of the things about the 40th gate in its denial is that it's only when it's operating correctly that the 40th gate then will even engage in labors that are going to bring the fruits that can be enjoyed. And we can take it a step back in human design terms, say, without entering into a bargain through strategy and authority, then that bargain is not going to be fulfilling. The fruits of the labors will be sour. It won't be enjoyable. So it's all of the ways that these things play in, and we start to see the bigger picture. We see a bigger perspective of what all of this means, really. The heart as a motor is not always easy for other people to understand because it's not like the other three motors. And when the generator motor, that sacral motor, is turned on at birth, then it doesn't stop. It's turned on for life. It's turned on until life leaves the body, frequency after frequency, on and on and on. With the motor of the emotional system, the wave never stops. That emotion in motion is the wave, that powerful motor never stops. The motor of the root ensures that the physical pressure never goes away because we need that physical pressure for life. All of these motors are very constant in their expression. This is not how the ego works. Through global cycles, in the terms of those, we've been living in a cycle for the last 412 years in which the 40th gate has been part of a much larger theme. This came into our background frequency in 1615. And it's a theme that comes to a close in 2027. And it means that we look at Gate 40 and the reward for work and the pleasure that is necessary as a reward for the work, for the benefit of the community. This has been ingrained into most societies in the whole world, globally, ever since 1615. This has been a gate that has brought a certain amount of decency into what it means to be a worker in this life. Rather than working 12 to 14 hours a day from the time that you're 7 years old until you drop down dead, it is Gate 40 that brought in the revolution of, though we need to have days off, we need to have just a set time for working. There needs to be time to relax, to enjoy the fruits of our labors. Why do we do it otherwise? I'm not doing it otherwise. The 37th gate is the grounding to the 40th gate. This is that other end of the channel, and it's the polarity in the wheel. And we know, so if we have the sun transiting through Gate 40, we will also have the earth transiting through Gate 37. And we will always have the channel of community activated in our design. The 37 on its own is a needy gate. It's the gate of the mouth, the gate of touch. It provides loyalty, it provides appreciation. This is how it supports Gate 40. Together, they are an incredibly strong force in our world. Channel of community, the bargains that it demands, they color just about every aspect of our lives. The 37 is the most communal of all the gates. The opposite of Gate 40, which is the Gate of Aloneness. Gate 37 can be very affectionate. And in the nature of the binary, it also means that it can be really cold. Gate 37, when it has what it needs, can be very cold if there's something it doesn't need. And it can also move in its wave. It's a solar plexus gate. It can move from being ready to give affection openly and warmly and without any conditions at all, to going into holding back all affection because the bargain wasn't met. And one really important thing to remember about bargains is that everyone involved in the bargain needs to know that there is actually a bargain happening. This is something that, it was quite funny, I suppose, in a way, when I first came into human design and I learned about this. I found my channel of community being the channel of the bargain. And eventually I started looking at all the places where I had made bargains. I had expectations of other people doing certain things because I was doing something. And yet they didn't know that they were in the bargain. And so when I then had my ratchet wave kick off because the bargain wasn't being met and it was just one thing too far, that bargain hadn't been met, whatever it was, they had no idea what was going on. So my bitterness that came in as a projector who had been, sort of let down in this invisible bargain that I had made with somebody, it was not a pretty sight. So you learn how to work with all these things. And I learned that, okay, I must be clear about the bargain. I must, whatever bargain it is. And if that bargain isn't actually honored, then I need to go back and I either need to reassess it. I need to find out why it wasn't honored. I don't just let it simmer away. Oh, you didn't do that. So-and-so didn't do that. Yeah. Because that's not helpful. At the end of the day, that's not, my stomach will not enjoy that process. And I do feel it. That bitterness gets into my stomach. And it's not going to be healthy at the end of the day. So I leave you with that. Look after your bargains. Look after your heart. Look after your stomach. Our egos are so necessary and they're so precious. They're such a vital force in the world. The amount of work that our egos are able to bring for the good of the community, it's phenomenal. So enjoy the recognition, because if you have a defined ego, then I honor you for what you are able to bring into this world, being a like-minded soul. How is it for you? That's a lot of stuff there in this channel and in this transit. How is it for you? And if there is something coming up for you, can you hold it gently? And can you not be too hard on yourself? Because the ego can be so hard on itself. No. I leave you with that. And until our next overview in 6 days' time, when we move into gate 64, the gate of confusion, because life is very confusing if you haven't got a good bargain. Life is very confusing if there's no bargain at all. How is anything going to work if we don't have a way of making it, making those things in place, and if we don't get enough alone time, and if things aren't delivered and all of those sorts of things, it can be very confusing. And that's where we go to next in the cycle. So I will either see you in the lines as we go through those over the next 6 days, or I will see you for the next overview. And until that point, as always, love yourself, as Ra would say, and go gently.